It is the heart that is important. Based on a lecture given by Soka Gakkai Study Department Chief Katsuji Saito, Suzanne Pritchard looks at the significance of the heart in Buddhism. The concept of changing our hearts or our minds is central to the process of inner transformation in Buddhism. In Nichiren Daishonin's writings, he variously urges us to quickly reform the tenets that you hold in your heart, or to become the master of our minds. The phrase, "it is the heart that is important," appears in both the Drum at the Gate of Thunder and the Strategy of the Lotus Sutra. The Japanese word kokoro or shin, which is customarily translated as mind or heart, has no exact English equivalent, for it is a term that encompasses the whole of one's mind, spirit, emotions, volition, and psyche. It can also indicate life as a psychosomatic entity. Therefore, when one encounters the word mind or heart, one should understand it in its widest possible sense. SGI President Daisaku Ikeda states, "The key to revolutionizing our state of life is to revolutionize our hearts and minds. That is most important. Where is the focus of our hearts? Are we striving to become healthier so that we can participate in even more in activities for Kozen Rufu, or are we allowing ourselves to backslide, using illness, for example, as an excuse to slacken our efforts, consequently becoming more ill? Are we aspiring to grow and help those around us become happy, or are we taking advantage of the organisation and our position, lording it over others? The results we produce are completely different depending on the focus of our hearts. Such subtle workings of the heart are the central theme of the doctrine of the 10 worlds and their mutual possession. The Daishonin says, explaining the wonder of life is the prime objective of all the sutras. One who is awakened to the workings of the mind is called a thus come one. Buddhism teaches that the heart is most important. Even if two people are making comparable efforts, the resulting effort will differ greatly if one person is motivated by some value transcending self, such as good, beauty, or the well-being of others, while the other is solely motivated by ego. From our standpoint, faith means determining that our fundamental objective in life is to advance Kozen Rufu, and then thoroughly dedicate ourselves to that cause. A self-centered heart is destined for the world of hell. This is true for individuals and society at large. A heart directed for the law and for the people, on the other hand, is destined for the world of Buddhahood. In fact, in light of the principle of the simultaneity of cause and effect, Buddhahood already exists in such a heart. A core principle in Buddhism is the 10 worlds or 10 states of life. It is an explanation of the different states of mind that all human beings experience, ranging from the life conditions such as hell, anger, and rapture, through to the state of bodhisattva, a state characterized by compassionate action, and the ultimate enlightened world of Buddhahood. Early teachings of Buddhism considered each world to be a separate domain. By engaging in Buddhist practice to eradicate the desires attached to each world, one could, over the course of many lifetimes, progress from one domain to the next. Eventually, having eliminated the desires that arise from the 9 life states or worlds, one could arrive at a state of Buddhahood, a state of perfection. In the teachings of the Lotus Sutra, however, this view is overturned. Here it is taught that each of the 9 worlds has the capacity for both a negative, destructive aspect and a positive, creative, enlightened aspect. As explained in the above quotations, whether we reveal the enlightened or Buddha aspect or our unenlightened, deluded aspect depends on whether we have a self-centered heart or a heart directed for the law and the happiness of the people. In other words, it is whether our motivation is about protecting ourselves, even at the expense of others, or protecting the law and all humanity. To assist us in rechanneling energy that has formerly been directed at winning over others into winning over ourselves, Nichiren Daishonin established the Gohonzon, a graphic depiction of his enlightenment, as the object of devotion for observing the mind or of Buddha within ourselves. Through vigorous practice to the Gohonzon and our efforts to advance Kozen Rufu, i.e. protecting the law and all humanity, where we are right now, we can open up the life condition of Buddhahood within us. The lives of all of you who chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo and exert yourselves for Kozen Rufu are infinitely noble and respect-worthy. You have as yet tapped only a fraction of the boundless power of Buddhahood you possess, and revealed only a tiny portion of your limitless Buddha wisdom. This 80th anniversary year is a time for each of us to freely and unstintingly manifest our Buddhahood. There's nothing to hold us back. Let's allow the 80 characteristics of a Buddha to shine forth from our lives with their full, untrammeled brilliance. The important point, says Suzanne, to bear in mind is that the key to enlightenment is found in the heart of faith in the mystic law, which exists in our own lives, and it is for this reason that Nichiren Daishonin repeatedly states that it is the heart that is important. Embedding within our lives a constant desire to protect the law and all humanity requires a shift away from a self-centered way of life. Through our practice of chanting and teaching others to do the same, we are able to break through egocentricity, arising from the tendency of fundamental disbelief, so that the Buddha state manifests within our lives. Nichiren Daishonin frequently speaks of the fundamental disbelief or fundamental darkness that exists inherently within each individual. Fundamental disbelief is the deeply rooted primal ignorance of the mystic law. Failure to recognize the mystic law gives rise to dark impulses which lead towards behavior that is negative or destructive. This belief, this deep disbelief in our own potential, renders us powerless. It leads to an inescapable path of suffering. However, just as the sun's rays penetrate darkness, so fundamental disbelief is instantly dispelled by the light of wisdom. It is therefore possible to instantly transform this deluded aspect of life so that the Dharma nature can be revealed. The Dharma nature directs one's life toward value creation based on the mystic law. Nichiren Buddhism teaches the possibility of changing karma and attaining Buddhahood in this lifetime in one's present form, based on revolutionizing one's heart. The letter, entitled The Drum at the Gate of Thunder, was written to Senichiyama, who, together with her husband, Abutsubo, supported the Daishonin while he was in exile on Sado Island. They formed a deep connection with him, and despite the risks to their own lives, became his followers. After Nichiren Daishonin was pardoned and returned to the mainland, they continued to frequently send offerings, and each year the elderly Abutsubo would undertake the long and treacherous journey to see the Daishonin at Mount Minabu. Quote, "It is 1,000 ri across the sea and mountains from Sado province to this province. You, as a woman, have held fast to your faith in the Lotus Sutra, and over the years you have repeatedly sent your husband here to visit me in your place. Surely the Lotus Sutra, Shakyamuni many treasures, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions know of your devotion." Unquote. Even while still in exile, Nichiren Daishonin exerted himself to find every means to reach out to his followers in Kamakura, many of whom were entertaining serious doubts about their faith in the face of such severe intimidation. Nichiren Daishonin tried to explain that not only does fundamental disbelief and delusion exist within the individual, it can also manifest in a collective form as forces of oppression which trample on people's human rights. At such times, the spirit to persevere against injustice enables the power of the law to manifest in the life of the individual, and furthermore, it will lead to the development of a network of enlightened people, a movement to transform society. In a number of writings, for example, The Opening of the Eyes and The Object of Devotion for Observing the Mind, Nichiren calls to his disciples to open their eyes to the significance of what was happening, to practice in the same way that he was, to attain enlightenment as an ordinary common mortal, and to establish the peace and the security of the land. The disciples on Sado all absorbed all of this first-hand from the Daishonin's spirit and character. These disciples, such as Abutsubo, Senichiyama, the lay priest of Ko and his wife, never forgot their mentor and their own bodhisattva spirit. That is why they crossed oceans and mountains each year. Seeking the votary of the Lotus Sutra leads to seeking the noblest state of life, the life condition of Shakyamuni and all Buddhas throughout the universe, and to the realization that the potential for enlightenment exists in all beings, including oneself. The egocentric mind wishes for an easy and comfortable life, but at the same time, there also exists deep in our lives a profound wish for the happiness of both self and others. The Lotus Sutra refers to this deep wish or original vow. Quote, "Only the Buddha, the world-honored one, is capable of knowing the wish that we have had deep in our hearts from the start." Unquote. The Lotus Sutra states that this deep desire is the wish of the bodhisattva who seeks the Buddha's enlightenment and lives with a compassionate and altruistic spirit for the happiness of others. In other words, this is a heart that wishes for the happiness of self and others together. The simile and parable, 3rd chapter of the Lotus Sutra states, quote, "Now because I want to make you recall to mind the way that you originally vowed to follow, for the sake of the voice hearers, I am preaching this great vehicle sutra called the Lotus of the Wonderful Law, a law to instruct the bodhisattvas, one that is guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhas." Unquote. This wish is inherent in the depths of the lives of all people, but it is prone to fall into oblivion within one's life. Since human beings tend towards egocentricity, they forget this vow. This is why Buddhism has was expounded to allow us to remember the vow and to rouse us into action in order to achieve it. The second chapter that we recite as part of our daily practice states, "The original vow of the Buddha was that the Buddha way, which they themselves practice, should be shared universally among living beings, so that they too may attain this same way." Unquote. Therefore, this is not just the vow of Shakyamuni, but the vow of all the Buddhas throughout the universe. The vow is in the inherent Buddha nature. It can sometimes appear that making this vow of the Buddha within our own lives functions as a bridge or access route to our own Buddhahood. But in the very moment we make a vow to fulfill our unique mission for Kozen Rufu, Buddhahood starts to blossom in our lives. Quote, "For example, though the moon is 40,000 yojanas high in the heavens, its reflection appears instantly in a pond on earth, and the sound of the drum at the gate of thunder is immediately heard 1,000, 10,000 ri in the distance. Though you remain in Sado, your heart has come to this province." Nichiren. With the analogy of the moon and the drum, Nichiren Daishonin reassures Sunichiyama that her heart has transcended the ocean and mountains and reached his heart. In other words, it is the heart of the disciple connected to the mentor by the vow, the same vow which exists in our own hearts. In the age predicted by Shakyamuni as the evil age of the latter day, a mentor can be defined as the person who is the first to awaken to the vow, obtain mastery of it, and teach it to others. The person who recalls this vow based on the teaching of the mentor is called the disciple. The more the disciple becomes aware that it is the heart that is most important, in other words, the possibility of transformation so that genuine happiness can be established, the more they become aware of the greatness of the mentor who has taught them, and this in turn deepens their seeking spirit towards that mentor. Those who wish to suppress this movement for peace and happiness will often try to cut the bond between the mentor and the disciple, because this is the most effective way to undermine and destroy the faith of the believers. By exiling Nichiren Daishonin to Sado, the established authorities tried to cut the bonds between the Daishonin and his disciples in order to suppress this movement of empowerment that was springing up around him. Prior to the sentence of exile, the authorities had tried to behead Nichiren Daishonin. When this failed, he was sent to Sado, but, even in exile, he redoubled his efforts to transmit his teachings to his followers, never allowing any obstacle that came his way to defeat him or delay the advancement of Kozen Rufu. During the early 1990s, the Nichiren Shoshu clergy utilized just the same tactic, trying to cut the bond between President Ikeda and the members of the SGI. The essence of the mentor-disciple relationship shared by the three presidents of the Soka Gakkai lies in the succession of the Bodhisattva spirit. Under President Ikeda's leadership, an organization of people remembering their vow and filled with the same Bodhisattva spirit was starting to be established. However, the priesthood, fearing the loss of influence and revenue, tried to subvert this movement for their own ends. President Ikeda's response, even though he was forbidden to speak publicly or have anything published in the Soka Gakkai newspaper, was to initiate a full-scale person-to-person dialogue campaign in order that the movement for the happiness of humanity would never be derailed, but would continue to grow into the magnificent organization of SGI we see today. Quote, "The way of attaining Buddhahood is just like this. Though we live in the impure land, our hearts reside in the pure land of Eagle Peak. Merely seeing each other's face would in itself be insignificant. It is the heart that is important. Some day let us meet at Eagle Peak, where Shakyamuni Buddha dwells." Nichiren's Writings, Volume 1, page 949. In the letter to Gijobo, the Daishonin quotes a passage of the Lotus Sutra which states, quote, "Single-mindedly desiring to see the Buddha, not hesitating even if it cost them their lives." Unquote. In both this passage and the passage quoted above, Nichiren Daishonin indicates that a heart that single-mindedly strives to use their life energy to support the law and people's happiness in this impure world is the heart of a Buddha. This phrase, that we recite every day, occurs in the parable of the excellent physician, which recounts the story of a physician whose children become sick from drinking poison. Although he offers them the best medicine, the poison has penetrated so deeply that the children refuse to take it. So the physician departs and sends a message saying that he has died in a distant land. In the dialogue, The Wisdom of the Lotus Sutra, the parable is discussed as follows. Soka Gakkai Study Department Chief Katsuji Saito. When the children hear of their father's death, the sutra says, all harbour thoughts of yearning and in their minds thirst to gaze at me. That is the Buddha. It further describes them as single-mindedly desiring to see the Buddha, not hesitating even if it cost them their lives. That's from the Lotus Sutra. In response to this single-minded seeking spirit, the eternal Buddha appears before them. Ikeda. That's another way of saying that they awaken to the eternal world of Buddhahood within their own lives, and single-mindedly seeking the Buddha is the key to this awakening. Nichiren says that he manifested the world of Buddhahood in his own heart and became enlightened to the three great secret laws through reading with his life the passage, single-mindedly desiring to see the Buddha, not hesitating, even if it cost them their lives. As we have noted before, regarding the term single-mindedly, the Daishonin remarks, single-mindedly desiring to see the Buddha may be read as follows: single-mindedly observing the Buddha, concentrating one's mind on seeing the Buddha, and when looking at one's own mind, perceiving that it is the Buddha. In other words, says Sensei, the mind of an ordinary person who seeks the Buddha becomes the mind of the Buddha itself. The heart is what really matters. One simply cannot understand the Buddhism without a pure seeking spirit stemming from the depths of one's heart. When we practice with the awareness that we might only encounter the Gohonzon once in 100 million or 10 billion years, a profound sense of appreciation fills our heart each time we perform Gongyo. Nichiren Daishonin, the Buddha of the latter day of the law, manifested the world of Buddhahood in his own heart through living the passage, single-mindedly desiring to see the Buddha, not hesitating even if it cost them their lives. We should deeply reflect on what this means. The only way for us to attain Buddhahood is to manifest a spirit of utter selfless devotion, of not hesitating even if it costs us our lives. Without this spirit, there can be no Buddhism. So says Suzanne, it must be categorically stated that this spirit of not begrudging one's life is not martyrdom. Rather, it is to devote your life not to illusions or shallow, transient happiness, but to that which is most precious, to the law which enables you to live the most satisfying life throughout eternity. Ultimately, we could say that the spirit of not begrudging, or rather the willingness to give our lives for the law, is actually the way to give up our attachment to the small, egocentric self. In other words, our cowardice or weakness. When we break through our previous limitations as a human being, it is as if the person we were no longer exists, and it is in this way that we give our lives. Through this way of living, we can become the masters of our minds. As President Ikeda points out, the mind of delusion of ordinary people is constantly wavering. We must not make this wavering mind our basis or guide. The Daishonin stresses this by using the following well-known passage. Quote, "Become the master of your mind rather than let your mind master you." Unquote. We must not be mastered by the inconsistent, weak, and ever-changing mind of delusion of ordinary people. To master our mind, we must guide it in the right direction. In that sense, the true master of the mind is the law and the teachings of the Buddha. Shakyamuni vowed to make the law, to which he had become enlightened, the master of his mind, and he took pride in living true to that vow. This is the way of life of taking refuge in the law that Shakyamuni emphasized in his final injunction to his disciples before he died. The priests of the various Buddhist schools in the Daishonin's lifetime forgot this spirit of Shakyamuni. Following their own arbitrary mind or thinking, they lost sight of the Buddha's teachings, denigrated the Lotus Sutra, and succumbed to arrogance. By contrast, the Daishonin taught that the true master of the mind is Myoho Renge Kyo, the heart of the Lotus Sutra and the fundamental law of all Buddhas, and set forth the concrete practice of chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo for mastering one's mind. Also, he frequently stressed to his followers that the important spirit of faith of seeking this true master of the mind, i.e. the mystic law, to allow oneself to be mastered by one's mind, is to lead a self-centered existence. Ultimately, one will be pulled this way and that by one's constantly wavering mind, succumb to egoism, and sink into the depths of darkness or ignorance. Conversely, to become the master of one's mind is to live based on the law. A teacher or mentor in Buddhism is one who leads and connects people to the law, teaching them that the law on which they should depend exists within their own lives. The disciples in turn seek the mentor who embodies and is one with the law. Looking to the mentor as a model, they exert themselves in their Buddhist practice. In this way, they lead a life that allows them to become the master of their mind. In other words, the existence of a mentor who embodies and lives in complete accord with the law and who teaches people about the vast inner potential they possess is indispensable for attaining Buddhahood in this lifetime. I had a mentor who practiced as the Buddha taught, second Soka Gakkai President Jose Toda, who dedicated his life to widely propagating the Daishonin's Buddhism in the modern age, and that has made me what I am today. President Toda is always with me as my spiritual mentor. Even now, day by day and moment by moment, I am carrying on a dialogue with my mentor in my heart. This is the spirit of oneness of mentor and disciple. Those who hold fast to their spiritual mentor as their compass and exert themselves as that mentor teaches are people who live based on the law." Unquote. From these passages, we can clearly see that the mentor-disciple relationship exists to help disciples establish their lives based on the law. The teacher or mentor has pioneered in his time to become the master of his mind. The disciples, inspired by the mentor, transcend their self-centered existence, i.e. being mastered by their minds, to similarly become the master of their minds. The bond of mentor and disciple is forever based on the law, and the heart which continues to believe in the law. An unusual hallmark of Buddhist philosophy is that there exists a fundamental equality between the mentor and disciple, as expressed in the Lotus Sutra, but this equality or oneness rests on the disciple elevating their life condition to that of the mentor. We often speak of equality, especially in the context of democracy, but from the standpoint of the Lotus Sutra, this lacks the factor of elevation of life condition. Equality in society can often be more like bringing people down to a common level. President Ikeda, in discussing the thoughts of the Greek philosopher Plato, who hailed from the land which gave birth to the first democracy, pointed out that Plato in fact had a low opinion of democracy as a system of government for the following reason. Quote, "Democracy is the creation and product of the people's great wisdom. But unless the people who actually make up the democracy know how to control their egoism and discipline themselves," Plato astutely pointed out, "it can easily lapse into a vicious, self-destructive form of mob rule, a far cry from democracy." End quote. Second Soka Gakkai President Jose Toda defined Kozen-Rufu as the elevation of the life condition of all humanity. Thus, as increasing numbers of people taking the spirit of the mentor, the heart of all Buddhas through the universe, as their own, strengthen their ability to draw out the enlightened aspect of their own inner 9 worlds. Its collective effect will be increasingly within communities and societies around the globe. President Ikeda observes, "Humankind now stands at an important crossroads. Will we descend into a world of violence and fear? Or will we construct a world of peace and security? We must overcome war, the interminable karmic disease of humankind, and actualize the principle of establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land on a global scale. That can only be realized through each individual effecting a change in the very core of their life. A great human revolution in just a single individual can contribute to a change in the destiny of all humankind." End quote. So Suzanne ends by saying, "It is for this reason that it is the heart that is most important."